CAD 911, please state the nature of your emergency.
All right. I'm starting. Let's see. Hey, come on, Siri. Hey, Siri, set an alarm for 15 minutes from now.
15 minutes, counting down.
All right. We got another 15-minute reprieve. So, this is part two, and we left off. I like to calculate the height of every top of every tread, and there's not really a good way to do that in those other calculators. So what I did is I wrote it to where it would just do it. I get a really extreme riser height like this 6 7/8 is actually 6 point this. And so people go, oh, why do you have that many decimal places? Well, when you use CAD and you take that size and you add it to itself, add it to itself, add it to itself, the more accurate you make this number, the less you're introducing an error. So when you get to the top, it's still correct. And that's why I go as many decimal places as the technology will give me. And
And
in
also,
that,
when you're marking out, Mike, when you're marking that stair out with your framing square, use a sharp pen, not a magic marker or anything, big, thick pen, because you want that,
yes,
because that mark will grow your dimensions if you don't watch it.
yes. In fact, I ran into that problem once because I wanted to use a Sharpie because I wanted it to be really bold when I was cutting. And I'll show you. That's why I totally came up with another thing that I do. Um, but in this here, it gives me the fire blocks on angle. It gives me all this information. And then the next one, this is where I got in trouble. The step diagonals. I needed these because I don't know if I have a picture of this handy. I'll explain the story. I cut them at my buddy's house with these black Sharpie lines, and as I'm tracing out the framing square, I'm lining up on the next mark and it's fat. And so I'm assuming, okay, I'm good. I'm good. I get to the top and I'm almost 3/4 of an inch off when I went to install this. And I had to feather 3/4 of an inch into this run because these are all a little bit wrong because my line was too fat and I was measuring to the wrong side of a 1/8 inch thick black line. So what I did was later I said, you know what? How come I can't mark out the board before I cut it with exactly where the diagonal of the rise and the run would be? Because that's just the construction master can do that too. You 10-inch run, 7 and whatever rise gives you diagonal. And then you go plus equals, and it will add to itself all the way up here. And I started doing that. And that way, it doesn't matter how thick or thin your line is, wherever that layout mark is, that's where you're going to put your framing square to reset to make sure it stays true every time.
That's good. That's a real good. You're the
Well,
first person I've seen do that. That's amazing.
only because I totally screwed it up. most most good inventions come from somebody messing something up. Um, so that's step diagonals. And then when I have all this calculated out, I've got the step diagonals, so I can measure that out. And then I also have the tread elevations. And so on the plan, if the plan said there's a platform at step 7, I just count down here to 7. And that tells me that it's 4 feet high to the top of that, which it is. Like all these dimensions are legit. And I can build my platform minus the sheeting. So it'd be 3/4, it'd be what, 3'11 1/4 would be all my framing for this platform. And then I drop on my 3/4 plywood, and now I'm at that tread height. Because, like I heard you say, a landing is just a tread that's longer.
Yeah, it's the same height as a tread, so it's just deeper. That's all.
Yep. And so we're going to get to another thing that I've done. I was taught how to hang a stringer off of a wall, but I don't really like that because sometimes, like especially if you're outdoors doing a deck, it's hanging off. I've seen guys add plywood down and then nail to it, and it's kind of sketch. But I've always liked to take the stringer all the way to the floor height And when you do that, you get to inlay a tread. So you get an actual legitimate nosing at the top. And normally, if you hang the stringer, that last piece is just square, or somebody tries to nail on a nosing and it'll, every you step on it, you'll just bend it loose. So, anyways, this was a table that I created. And then I remember sharing it with you, and you were like, 10 foot? What about 11 foot? And I'm like, what? And you're like, oh, 10 foot. That's normal down here. We need 11 foot. So we had to do another table.
Well,
And
it's funny because, for the longest, yeah, it was 8 foot ceiling heights. And then we went to 9 foot ceilings. And then all of a sudden, people wanted 10 foot ceilings. And that became the standard. Well,
Yep.
now people are wanting 11 foot ceilings. I'm doing, a lot of custom homes, and they request 11 foot ceilings.
It's
So
crazy.
that's why I asked you that.
So we're getting to the point where it'll be kind of fun because we're going to show the assembly, and maybe this book is more than it needs to be, but I'm trying to show a sequence of how to think about it, how to calculate it, the tools you're going to need. In my mind, this is the basic tools. Some of these you may not need, but if you had these, you'd be just fine. Especially these little what we call stair nuts or whatever these things. And you can get some from a company called Squid Jig that are taller than this. And so they really work good. You can clamp them on the side of a saw and use it to rip but anyways, look them up. They're in Washington State. Squid Jig, I think is their address or their name. And yes, I do use Construction Master, but I don't trust it for certain things because it's not accurate for jacks. But well, that's a whole different video. So you got to select your material. If you'll look, this is a 2x12 from Canada that has no knots. And when I saw that, I was like, this is like a unicorn board. It's magical. So this is what I laid out with. This was my template. And what you see right here is I randomly come in where I think the first part of the step is going to be, and I drive a nail, and then I pull my step diagonals all the way along this edge so that when I slide the framing square along, I line up with this. Framing square goes this way, then it should land on that next step diagonal. And then I slide it down and line it up again. And that way everything is perfect. And you'll see here in a minute. So there's the tread angle. It's the long one. And this one happens to be 10 inches right there. And then this is whatever the rise is. I can't really read that. And the only reason the hammer's in the picture was I was trying to hold this on the board and take the picture. And the frame square kept wanting to fall off. So that's why you see the hammer. But yeah, the Squid Jig guys, they make these and they're a lot taller. They stick down quite a bit so that you can have it. It's easier to get around the rounded edge. Because that's another thing is if your 2x12s are rounded, sometimes that little stair jig fights you. But here's the step diagonals right here. You see how I mark them? That's a pen, really thin pen line, and then I just do a Sharpie number so that I can make sure I don't miss anything. And you don't have to do this. This is just the way I do it. There's
That's a
framers
good
that
way.
say,
That's a good way.
well, there's framers who go, you don't need a chop saw. I can do everything with a skill saw. I'm like, good for you. Awesome. But you don't have to tell me what I don't need because I don't want to frame like you. I want to frame like me. And that's the way everybody should be. You frame how you want to frame. If you're happy at night and you're doing the best you can and people are happy with your work, great. Not going to tell you you're wrong, but I'm going to compete with you and I'm going to make mine try to look better than yours. Like, here's a secret. Always use hot dip galvanized nails because nothing looks worse than rusting nails until everything gets covered up. So I used to use what's an extra $10 a box or whatever, but none of my projects had rust on them. So they just looked good when you walked into them.
Mike, what you're saying there, trying to make you're doing it the right way and making it look so much better. And that's how you get more jobs. That's the same way with designing homes or building homes or whatever. You take pride in your work. You try to give the people a little bit more than they're expecting, and they're just tickled to death.
Yep. It's a mindset. I read a little short story, Reader's Digest, which nobody nowadays knows what that means. Young kids don't know. But this guy built a house his dad was a builder and he built a house. And when they were done, the dad said, "Okay, that's your house." He gave it to him, but the guy had cut corners and done everything, and so he really built himself a piece of crap, thinking that that was what he was supposed to do. And the moral of the story is, you build it like your grandma's going to live in it, or you're going to live in it. So you put it as excellent and perfect as you can.
Yep, that's exactly right.
So there you go. I've traced out all the lines. I've cut them. Um, I even talk about this. Like people say, "You're a hack. You overcut." Well, I got a picture for you here in a minute. I've had people get on me. "Hey, you overcut. You've just ruined the whole stringer." And I'm like, "No, actually, there's 5 inches to that point. But if you look at it on the backside, it's not overcut because the blade is circular. So the blade cuts in 7 of an eighths this way, and then it curves down to nothing. And every stringer I do gets this. I always make the center stringer really strong. And then the walls are nailed to the wall. So it doesn't matter what you do, they're not going anywhere because they're attached to the walls. So anybody that says, "Oh, you have to pull out a Japanese pull saw and make these all flawless," that's only if this is an exposed, finished product, or if it's outdoors where people are going to see it. It has nothing to do with the strength. It's like, I don't know. There's people that don't know a lot and they want to grab at little details that they think they can virtue signal. I don't play that. I overbuild everything. So, like, you can jump down these stairs, nothing's happening. This is pretty much the installation, and it tells you this is how it works. This is how stairs work. They're just a big triangle. It's trig, and this is the sequence that you put them in. If you need a platform, you build it first. Then you dry fit all your stringers. You cut one and dry fit it. If it works, then you cut them all. Then I put in fire blocking in the walls. Then I attach the spacing ledger to that, and I think I got a picture of that somewhere. Yeah, here we go. So you do your platform. You get a stringer up to this one here and a stringer up to this one, and you make sure they work. Then you cut them all, and you put blocking in I don't have this done yet, but there should be blocking for the handrail too. That's another thing you want to do. Like, this is me dry fitting.
And I noticed you extended your landing there. Go back one picture. Go back one photo. You extended your landing there where your upper stairs are coming down and setting on it solid, and they're not hung.
I hate that. I hate hanging them.
You see people hang that, and it needs to have a support under it.
Apartments are really bad about that when they have stairs that are doing this, because they might have 3 or 4 sets of stairs right stacked on top of each other, and you start creating a headroom issue when you turn around. But in this instance, there's going to be a wall. This is going to be stopped, and you won't, or it'll be storage under there. But all this gets sheetrocked in, and it's got a closet door. And I always like to extend them. I just feel like this is so much stronger.
Yeah.
That's just how I do it. This was a fire escape for a 3-story commercial building. This is ICF all the way around so that the stairwell's fireproof. So here's what I was talking about in sequence. You get the measurement for the fire blocks, and when you dry fit your stringer, you trace along the bottom of the stringer and make a line on all these studs. And now you know where to put your fire blocks, because they're going to go right along that line. And then you glue all the way along here, because you're going to take that spacing ledger and you're going to nail it flush along the bottom here through face nailed into these fire blocks and these studs. So if you do it right, it looks like it's a continuous piece of wood. I mean, it just, you take a little pride, get them in there straight, and then that way the human eye is going to think that's a wood, one single board. And that'll get you jobs with, builders that want you to be a good framer. You'll have to forgive this wood. It's super wet because this is Washington State. Everything's wet all the time. But there's your spacing ledger. It's glued and nailed, and then it's glued again because now the stringer is going to go flush to the bottom. And that all was because you dry fit your stringer and you used it as a guide. And now here's a stringer that's nailed to the spacing ledger, which is nailed to the fire blocks. And this is out on Lake Washington, same thing. And everything sits on something. There's nothing that's hanging. I hate hanging. And then I'll put pressure blocks up in here too. But yeah, hit pause on any part of this if you're watching. If you have questions, you can see things that you want to read them. I may be going too fast. Then when your stringers are all in, you always do the kickers first. And I always start in the middle, and you don't step on any of this because you don't want to create a sag and then attach all these things because you'll end up nailing a sag into your stairs. So,
I've seen people start at the bottom, start putting those on, and their weight is sagging the middle one. Have
yep.
you never ever noticed that?
Yeah, but you know what? We're going to hit stop and we're going to start right up here and we're going to talk about that.